Hey there. So today, instead of looking at how to write programming, we're actually going to look at someone else's programming and dissect it. And today we're going to be looking at the CrossFit affiliate programming for the month of September in 2023. Now, I want to start off by saying that I'm really grateful that CrossFit does provide this as an option for affiliate owners. They have a ton of great scaling options, and I think it's fantastic for coaching development, as well as if you are using this programming, providing a uniform class experience from your 6 a.m. class to your 6 p.m. class. That being said, the meat of this program is really bad. All right. And we're going to talk about exactly why that is. So the first thing that we're going to look at, I knew when I opened this programming that I was going to have issues with it, but I didn't know just how bad it was going to be. So the first thing that I always screen for, we're interested in delivering the best results in terms of fitness gains for our clients with the minimum risk of injury. And one thing that we need to pay close attention to is the amount of overhead work that we're exposing people to. The shoulder is the most mobile joint in the human body. And most people are coming to us from desk jobs, which means that their shoulders are internally rotated already. The muscles of the anterior shoulder and where the pec attaches, that's very tight for people. By default, these muscles start to get shorter and weaker, and the muscles along the backside of the shoulder start to get stretched out. So if we're asking people to do excessive volume of pressing and pulling overhead, it's a recipe for a rotator cuff injury, a slap tear, and that person's no longer going to be a client at your gym, and they're also not going to be reaching their fitness goals because they're going to have too much pain to pursue a fitness program. So we need to really be careful about how much work we're exposing people to for the shoulder joint. And you can see here, Monday, muscle up and devil's press, 2 overhead movements. Tuesday, 150 wall balls. Wednesday, 90 toes to bar, 30 wall walks. Thursday, not so heavy, only 36 pull-ups, 63 Russian kettlebell swings. Again, that's an overhead movement too. And then Friday, capping off the week of massacre to the shoulder joint with grace, which is 30 clean and jerks for time. So one thing that a lot of people don't understand about overuse injuries is that it's the straw that broke the camel's back. So somebody might not, and that's why it's hard to really assess where an injury comes from, is because doing this week of programming is going to set somebody up to have this injury further down the line, right? It might not be during this workout where they're doing 90 toes to bar and 30 wall walks, but it might be in the following week when they're doing 75 pull-ups and 125 feet of handstand walking, right? It's going to show up at some point. And if you're seeing people walking around your gym kind of rubbing the front of their shoulder, then they're already on their way to this. And one thing that we can do to really safeguard and protect the shoulder is by including horizontal rowing, all right, horizontal pulling. And that's something that I like to include at least twice a week in my program to really build up the muscles of the upper back and pull the shoulder back into a safer position. And we can see here that only once in the month of September do we have any type of horizontal pulling. And it's almost as an accident because it's part of this dumbbell complex, a man maker, where somebody's doing renegade rows. It's not programmed deliberately anywhere, okay? And you only have one instance of it in the whole month. So something else that I like to think about when programming, again, to avoid injury, is trying to include different planes of movement. Now, by default, most of the movement that we're going to be doing in the gym is going to be sagittal plane movement. Most exercises just are sagittal plane exercises. But there are 2 other planes of movement that are frequently ignored. And in this program, we only have one instance of a frontal plane movement, which is a Turkish get-up. And the Turkish get-up encompasses 3 planes of movement. But it's not included anywhere deliberately. It's, this is just kind of like by accident that it's included here, because the Turkish get up is a great movement, and, props to CrossFit for exposing people to Turkish get ups, but there should also be deliberate frontal plane work, lateral box step overs, Cossack lunges, lateral dumbbell raises. Those are all great options for frontal plane work, which are not present at all. And then transverse plane. So basically all sport happens in the transverse plane. And the only deliberate transverse plane movement that we have here is running. There's no training. Transverse is moving from one side of the body, a movement that essentially it's rotation, right? And we're getting that to some degree with walking lunges and with running. But it would also be good to train this deliberately, like with rotational medicine ball slams, landmine rotations. Those are a few easy ways that can be worked into a program. And again, something to look for on a weekly basis is this inclusion of transverse plane movement. All right. And then moving on to our patterns. So we have a little bit more variety here, but this is primarily biased towards squat patterns and upper body pushing. And so again, if we know that most people are going to be sitting and the anterior chain of the body is already tight, if we're including excessive volume of squatting and pressing, we need to, like, low-hanging fruit for everyone is going to be biasing more posterior chain work. And this program is really biased this month in particular towards, we can see a lot of orange and red, which if you're looking at my legend here, that is upper body pushing and squatting, right? Which again, these are anterior chain dominant movements. So leaving a lot off the table here. Moving into unilateral and bilateral. So this is important for correcting imbalance because it's particularly with the upper body, right? You're either right-handed or left-handed. Maybe some of us are ambidextrous, but the majority of us are either right-handed or left-handed. And that means, particularly for the upper body, we should be paying attention to doing unilateral movements, single arm bench presses, single arm overhead work, where we are including that in our programming. And biasing towards more unilateral for the upper body is, again, going to help us even out these asymmetries and reduce risk of injury. And so we can see, again, the large part of this program is biased towards bilateral movement. And then finally, we move on to the balance of strength and conditioning here. So strength work is represented in green, and we only have 4 days of dedicated strength work, which to me is really problematic. Again, for most people, low-hanging fruit, they lack strength and aerobic conditioning. And so those are the two things that we should be biasing our program towards. And we're really not, some of you might, are probably going to argue this point, right? That a workout like this Sunday workout is a strength workout. It's not. Just because we have bench press in a workout does not mean that it's a strength biased workout. We need to clearly separate as much as possible strength and conditioning. Those are separate stimuli, and that is because we're sending competing signals when we're trying to train strength and conditioning at the same time. Your body is asking, do you want me to become stronger, or do you want me to become more aerobically fit? And those two, we're losing efficiency in training both of those if we're trying to train them in the same session, much less in the same workout, the same WOD. So the best practice is going to be to separate those. And if somebody's training in your gym for 3 days a week, we want to maximize their time in the gym and get them the most results possible. Again, by lowering chance of injury as well. If I am fatigued going into a heavier barbell movement, my chance of injury increases. It's really that simple. So having a rest period in between my dedicated strength sets not only sets me up for getting better results from that strength training session in terms of hypertrophy and gaining strength, but also lowering my risk of injury. And the last thing that I want to point out here, and this is the most egregious in my opinion, and the biggest thing that I'd like to see CrossFit change, is the acknowledgement of heart rate zones in conditioning workout. This knowledge has been around for so long, and especially lately in the past years, we've had so many people find out that there are specific adaptations that only happen when we're training in a certain heart rate zone. If we exceed that heart rate zone, which for zone 2 is going to be 70% of our max heart rate, if we exceed that, we are losing those adaptations, okay? And just to name a few, increasing our mitochondrial efficiency, right? Eccentric hypertrophy of the heart, so the ability of the heart to stretch further with each contraction, right? Or sorry, with, not with a contraction, but with each beat of the heart to fill with more blood, to pump more blood through the body. Those cannot happen if the heart rate exceeds 70%, and that it's going to, like, 70% is kind of a ballpark figure. It's going to vary slightly for different people. But the less fit you are, right, the less aerobically fit you are, the lower that number should be. And if it doesn't matter if a workout, this workout is 3,500 meters of rowing, 90 bench presses with a 30-minute cap. Just because that's a longer workout, that doesn't mean that somebody cannot do that workout with their heart rate in the 80 to 90% of max range and would be missing all of those benefits. So it's really, disappointing that CrossFit will not acknowledge this. And, that's one of the main reasons that I make videos like this, is hopefully to try to inform more people that training in zone 2 is really important if we want to live longer, if we want to have better results from our strength training work by separating a strength session with a zone 2 session with another strength session. We're going to get better results when we go into that next bout of strength training on Wednesday or Friday or whenever it is, by giving our body a chance to recover through zone 2 training. So I've said enough. I'll leave it here. I appreciate you guys watching the video, and stay tuned for next week.